Good morning, everybody. This is Walk the Dog with Mort. It is Wednesday, the 21st at 6 a.m. I'm awake, I'm alert, and ready to have a good day. Yesterday was an interesting day. On the work side of things, we had basically, the short version is our perforce went down and no one could check in anything, which was a little hectic. So, the ability to not make changes to the game while you're working on it is always a nice little roadblock. But technology is fun. So, everyone basically makes changes on their local machine, has them ready to go. And then when it gets fixed, which it did sometime around midnight, it's like everyone's trying to check it all in. I woke up this morning, walked over to my computer, checked in my stuff from yesterday, so, which, speaking of which, some of my stuff was set 15 stuff, but some of it was live stuff, because on the live side of things, at least on NA, I can't speak to every region, but everyone was freaking out about this new, and I use new in big old brackets, this new Morgana comp that involves Poppy on Morgana and 6 Bastion. And it's just hilarious. It's the second major time this has happened in NA, where there are champs there. There are no changes. But it's like all of a sudden, one person out there climbs a bunch of LP with it, and everyone goes, oh my God, it's a comp. I can't believe it. And you're like, 6 Bastion plus Morgana seems pretty straightforward. But cool to see nonetheless, right? In a meta where we have a good meta and lots of things are playable, people are still finding even more things playable, and that's great, right? So I know people have their qualms with the set or whatever, but this is a very, very good meta right now. And so, again, if you look at what's currently on live and you're like, I don't like this, I don't think you can make the claim that balance is your priority or balance makes the game fun. Because as terms of balance goes, it is a dang good meta. Now, again, you could talk about the set design or the set mechanic or whatever. Those are different conversations, but balance-wise, it's pretty damn good. And in fact, while prepping 14.5, so to be real, I had a Morgana 3 buff in there that was a 5% buff, very minor. I pulled it last night, thank God. But that's all that's the patch was already small, and so far all I've done to it since Monday was pull 2 changes to make it even smaller. So it'll be a pretty small patch. So yeah, anyway, cool to see. Moments like this make me happy, but also I ask those of you that are the loyal followers and whatever, I ask that the next time a meta comes out or a new set comes out, and the challenger players say there's only 4 playable comps or whatever, have some doubt, because just remember, they don't know what they're talking about either. And they're going to say there's only 4 until someone else discovers the 5th. And then they're going to go, oh yeah, I totally knew it. Yeah. Come on. So anyway, there you go. Questions today. I think the questions were actually kind of hard today. Let's see. I got the paper though. I've gotten this habit now. Remember how I said I was a creature of habit? Now every night right before I go to bed, what I do is I go downstairs where I have all this stuff set up and charging, and I take the piece of paper and I write down the questions that are the oldest with the upvotes. I make sure I write down about 5 of them so that it's ready to go for me in the morning. And then I go to bed, right? So now it's become part of my habit to prep these questions. So, yeah. All right. Oh, first one's easy. Someone was asking, when is the next dev hour? Now, in the unlikely event you don't know what dev hour is, dev hour was a thing we did twice, technically a third halftime, but I kind of fucked it up, where me, Whitrock, and Giovanni, 3 of the most senior designers who have been on the team the longest. Whitrock's been on the team technically longer than I have. He's one of 3 people who's still on TFT who have been here longer than me. Him, Linda, and Gavin, I believe. And then Giovanni, who's been on the team for a decent while as well. I think he joined mid-set 2, left for a little bit, came back, but he's been doing good stuff. And what we did is we go through all the 1 costs, and we like tiered them based on their design. And then we did it on the 2 costs. And so next we're supposed to do it on the 3 costs. Although I think at this point, the 1 cost list might only go up to like set 10 to show you how long it's been since we've done it. And it was good content, and it was actually really good internally also, because it showed a lot of our other designers what we thought of the sets. And remember how I was talking about internal documentation yesterday? This is a good example of like having the lessons of like what 2 costs we thought were good design and what 2 costs we thought were bad design, and why is valuable content, right? Is valuable internally to like learn how to make good content and what appeals to players and why. So like it's really good content, and we want to make more of it. I will say we had at least one designer on the team who was like, yeah, that's cool, you made it and all, but I don't want to sit through a 2-hour video. Could you please write it in written form? Which, fair, admittedly not something I'm super excited to do, but I get it, fair. And so we actually started that project as well, although I think I dropped the ball on that one. We have this giant spreadsheet that needs to be filled out at some point. Anyway, so the question is, when is the next dev hour? The problem is that for me, like I said, doing all this extra stuff and talking about work for me, I like it. It's a hobby. I enjoy it. But the idea that I have to go, hey, Whitty and Giovanni, and Whitty especially is very good about healthy work-life balance. He draws boundaries really, really well. Giovanni a little less so, but he's still, good. And go, hey guys, I know you only have a weekend now. Want to come spend it talking with your boss about TFT for 3 hours? That's kind of a hard sell, and I always feel bad. It's one of the reasons why I don't often include, I always want to give credit to a lot of the people on the team that did good stuff, but I also, from my position of power, because I'm a, senior director, I never want to ask them and be like, hey, want to go spend your weekend talking to your boss about your job? Like, that feels so awkward. Kent's another one who I'm often like, I'd love to have Kent on the stream and talk about, but I also want Kent to go have a life, and he's going to be, I think he's engaged now, and it's like, I don't need to be pulling him away from his fiance and stuff like that. So finding the time where I can have people on there, but not feel like I'm, ordering them to, is the awkward line I draw. Now, to be clear, Whitty and Giovanni especially have both been like, yeah, happy to do it. And what happened was we got halfway through recording the 3 costs. I still have the video file on my main PC where we got through, I think, set 5 or 6. And then something came up in the middle of it, like my wife needed me for something and I had to run. So we had to cancel it, which kind of sucked. So it's really just about finding the right time to do it on top of everything else. And that's tricky. Now, for what it's worth, considering there's so much interest here, I will see if I can talk them into maybe doing it during the Riot summer break, which is like first week of July. But again, like maybe they have plans. Maybe they're going to go visit family. I don't know. So no promises. But again, I like doing that type of content. And it's funny because I was thinking about it like, well, shouldn't maybe a player do that? Like Froden and Raditz and Asa do a tier list. And the problem is I've seen them do this before. And all of their assessments are just based on power. Right? It's like, yep, that was strong at one point. S tier. Ooh, that was never strong. D tier. That's not good design, right? Like, something can be really good design and just didn't have a place in the meta or had the wrong trait structure, right? I think we saw even in the 1 and 2 cost space, the traits a champion has can really lean into or elevate a design. So, car. But yeah. So. Woohoo! Going a little fast. Okay, so TLDR, dev hour someday. But don't want to make my team not have a healthy work-life balance. That's the big blocker. So, okay, cool. Next question. Oh, someone asked, have you ever thought about having an in-game encyclopedia that talks about all this stuff? Talks about like bag sizes, champions, abilities, things like that. So, if I could snap my finger and have an in-game wiki, would I do it? Yeah, of course. Of course. Problem is, I can't snap my finger and do it. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, right? And so the question becomes, whenever you're assessing something like this, let's say it's going to cost, you have to look at it as a cost, right? So let's say in order to make this in-game wiki, I need 3 weeks of an engineer's time and a month of 2 designers' time to set it all up, plus a month of localization time, and maybe even some writer's time and whatever. Like, these are fake numbers, but let's just say that's what it costs. The question becomes, if I'm going to pay this cost, what could I get instead, and does it bring more value to players, right? So as a hypothetical example, if I could have a designer spend a month on a wiki and writing everything out, or I could have a designer spend a month and make 50 new augments, which one has more value to the player? Pretty sure it's the augments, right? Because augments are something everyone enjoys and gets to play with and creates more variety in the gameplay. Whereas an internal wiki is something that we see this in other games, and we have the stats on this, is like, if you're lucky, 5% of players use, and even when they do, they use it once or twice. So it's like, how much value is that really providing? And I get it. Like, I understand the need, because it's like, if you're somebody who wants to learn, for me, hilariously enough, growing up, this is what strategy guides were for me, right? Like, Mario 64 doesn't have an internal wiki, but it does have a strategy guide that shows you where everything is and how it all works. And I would sit there and read that strategy guide and learn about game design. And it was fascinating, right? Like, so again, if I were a kid playing TFT, would I love an internal thing that talks about all like the in-depth details? You bet I would. I'd love it. But generally speaking, you have to make these decisions around the total value it's going to provide to everyone out there. So that's the tricky part. And then the other big thing is that TFT changes so often. So the other thing you're doing is, if you create this in-game wiki, you're essentially signing yourself up for, in the future, someone will now have to update this wiki at all times, right? Every time you make a change, you've now just added, let's say, an hour to every task to don't forget to update the wiki, right? Even something like Talker's Trials, for example, every time we make a balance change now, we've added this extra headache of don't forget to go change Talkers. I think it was Leduc who called us out. This patch with the item rework, Static Shiv is becoming Void Staff. And on PBE for a day, there's an encounter in the Talker's Trials where there's a bunch of Zeris with Static Shivs, but now they were just a bunch of Zeris with Void Staffs, which wasn't very interesting. And so Victor had to go in and change them all. That's a new recurring cost, right? And so the best designs that you add to the game don't just keep adding a recurring cost to your development, because then all of a sudden you end up in a situation like, I don't know, World of Warcraft, where it's like your game's so complicated, you have to make one little change and update it in 17 places, and that's not great either. So I'm getting a little off topic here, but the TLDR is, the idea of one is cool. From everything we've analyzed, the cost isn't worth it and the value isn't worth it. And so what I'd rather do, and this is what I tried to do a little bit with TFT Hub, is I'd rather support the people who are trying to do this externally, right? I want to support the like mindful ones or the tactics.tools or whatever that are going to create these tables and things like that, right? And so it's like, if you want to know what Magic Roll can give you, it's out there. The information's out there. Quick Google search pulls it up. So it's there, as long as the information is there and present. But there will always be these idealists that will yell at you and be like, well, it's not in game, so you're an asshole. I get it, but at the end of the day, as long as the information is out there and people can find it, that's going to have to be the bar for us. So, yeah, I think, you know, it's been interesting watching Froden work with TFT Academy, because it's clear there is value in these external websites. It's just a question of what type of content do people want in these external websites, right? And right now, it seems like the premium of content is on how to win, you know, whether it be a tier list or augment stats that don't exist, or, you know, whatever, meta tier lists. I already said that. The current demand for content is how do I win? So there doesn't seem to be as much demand for everything else. But I think like one example is the trait tracker boards. I think there's always a high demand for what a good trait tracker board is. Or another high demand is an artifact wiki, where it's like, what artifacts are good on what champs? I guarantee you the first person when set 15 comes out to make a nice guide that's like, hey, if you have Blighted Jewel, play this champ. If you have RFC, play this champ. That person's guide will be followed a lot, you know? So there you go. Oh yeah, localization, that's the other. So much text. Okay. Next one. Could adaptive force work in TFT? We've had this conversation internally a lot. This has come up quite a bit. And everyone's immediate reaction is much like players, where the first time you bring it up, someone's like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. We should totally do that, right? Where it's like, if you put and I'm going to be exaggeratory here, you put a giant, actually let's not be exaggeratory, let's just use Giant Slayer. If you put a Giant Slayer on a Zeri, it gives AD. And if you put a Giant Slayer on a Vhagar, it gives AP. That way, everything doesn't have to have both to make it flexible. And this is also true in Origins, right? Like Street Demon currently gives AD and AP. And it could just give Jinx AD. And it could give Brand AP. And that would be a little more elegant in terms of design. So why don't we do that? Well, the problem is, when we talk about our complexity ceiling, it's pretty easy to remember like physical and magic. That's a archetype that has existed and it's pretty clear to our players. But instead, if you have just, you know, flex or adaptive force, it's like, what does that mean? Oh, who does that give? Okay, Kog'Maw. Kog'Maw set 13. What does he get from adaptive? Oh, AP. Makes sense. What does Kog'Maw from set 14 give? Well, AD. Wait, what? Why? Why is that different each set? And you could argue, well, then just don't design Kog'Maw to be different every set. But Kog'Maw is one of those champions that allows creating sets where it's like you can have Kog'Maw fill the slot you need to, which is valuable. Kane's another example. Kane can do magic. Kane can do physical. Both are fine. It'll work, you know. So there's the confusion and intuitiveness factor of it. The other thing is that I just don't think we need AD, AP, and adaptive force. So to me, it's like one or the other. I think you have AD and AP, or you have adaptive force. Halfway point. And if you have adaptive force, then I think all of a sudden the game becomes a little more boring, right? It's like, does Deathblade give adaptive force? Ooh, another car. Does Deathblade give adaptive force? Does Deathcap give adaptive force? At which point every item just goes on everybody, and It's not very interesting. There's no interesting decisions. So that's not great. So overall, and then the final one is like a hybrid champion. Hybrid champions is one of those fantasies we'd love to keep doing. But if you have adaptive force, it's like, well, what does that do? So overall, when we look at it, with any design decision, you have to weigh the pros and the cons. And from what we can tell, the pros don't seem to outweigh the cons. And it just doesn't actually solve that much without actually adding it as a third thing, at which point then we're just increasing the number of stat complexities and things like that. So at this point, I think just sticking with AD and AP, keeping it simple, has been kind of the path we'd want to go. Now, I did message Giovanni about this because I swear the last time we talked about this, I swear someone was like, oh, but here's this thing. And we all went, oh yeah, that's right. That's why we totally can't do it also. He couldn't remember what it was either. He also said that he was interested in adaptive space as well. And it makes sense. Because, like, again, one of the big benefits is like that trait or like origin, right? Like Street Demon will just look nicer. But yeah, overall, we just haven't seen a great execution on it that solves. Because the other thing is too, we talked about this before, right? Like when you ship a game, all of a sudden players have learned this game. And then when you change that learning, that's called change aversion. Even if the new solution is better, it has to be better enough to outweigh that learning cost. And again, adaptive force is one of those things where, like, doesn't actually make the game that much better. So, because the other thing we'd be losing also is, like, sometimes it's kind of fun to put a cool AP scaler on a champion that, like, realistically you're not going to do. But if you happen to get some bonus AP, that's cool. So sometimes having a cool AP scaler is neat on a physical champion. Now, I don't think we've ever done the opposite, where there's a cool physical scaler on an AP champion. But maybe that's a thing we should do. Maybe. So, yeah, TLDR, could adaptive force work? It could. Are we going to pursue it? Probably not. Probably not anytime soon. It would have to take a big swing to need to do it, and I just don't think we're there. So, okay. Next question's a fun one. What is my TFT origin story? Did I apply for the job or what? How did I get the job? What happened? So, the way it worked is behind the scenes. This was like after Odyssey and Nexus Blitz, I believe, if I remember my timelines right. We'd done Odyssey, we'd done Nexus Blitz, and we started I'll call it an internal R&D project. Can't talk about what it is, but we started an internal R&D project. Now, we were a bit into that internal R&D project, and then January came around, and that's when auto chess had started being discovered, right? And this is where people like, Meddler were playing auto chess and going, dang, this is pretty cool. And so Meddler, who I think gets the props for, he was one of a few people, but he's the main one who got it going, pushed Riot to be like, hey, we're going to make our own auto chess, and we're going to do it in the League of Legends engine so we can get it out quick. Okay, cool. And so Meddler formed a team, mostly of people who were really, really good with the League of Legends engine and could make things fast. You know who's not that? Not me. I'm not very good. When it comes to technical ability on our team, I'm actually one of the lowest. Mostly because I don't do it anymore, not that I can't, but I'm just nowhere near like Giovanni or Whitrock or anything like that. Whitrock was on that original group, along with some other people, like I think August was on that team, a couple others. But yeah, small team, Cameron, Gavin, stuff like that. And they started building the game. And they also had a design leader, because Medler's responsibilities were above that, so Medler couldn't do it. So Medler hired this person to do it. I forget, Volti? Volti was his riot name. So Volti was the design director. And so that team worked on it. And all the while, I was working on this internal R&D project. And I made, during that internal R&D project, I was the design leader of that project. I made the tough call that I looked at the project we were working on. And I said, hey, this is going to take us X time. Players will play it for X amount. And I think we should cancel this project. I don't think we're going to get the value out of it. Which is a hard thing to do, because it's basically saying, hey, I'm the design lead and I think this project's doomed. But it did save Riot a lot of money and time, because one of the worst things you can do, like, it's called sunk cost fallacy, is where it's like, well, we've been working on this project for 2 years, we can't throw it away. And then you work on it for another 3 years and it ends up being doomed. That was Project Hammer. Project Hammer at Nintendo was sunk cost fallacy. It's like, well, we spent all this money on cutscenes and development and whatever, can't throw it away. And then we ended up wasting more money. So I wanted to avoid that, and I had my internal R&D project canceled. And so after that, it worked out nicely too, because the team went, well, if we cancel this, we can move all these people over and help get TFT out the door. And so that's when people like Linda moved over, a couple others, and really started making sure the TF team was staffed up. And when I say people, I don't mean a lot of people, right? We're talking about small teams here. But like the TFT team could grow from like 10 to 25, you know? So they got some extra power, which is good. I was not moved over. So from there, what I actually did for a while was I spent a month pitching some other projects. It's like, hey, we could do something like this or something like this. A little bit of time just like pitching projects. Someday maybe I'll be able to tell the story of those, but can't today. Well, anyway, while I was doing that and figuring out what was next, TFT was getting ready to go out the door. They were like a month from shipping. And that design director really wasn't gelling with the rest of the team. And this is one of the hard things, is like sometimes you get those creative geniuses that can be hard to work with. And so, you know, he was asked to leave the team because it just wasn't working out. It was creating some personnel issues and things like that. So I was asked, so that left a big hole, right? TFT needs a senior designer leader to sort of be the guiding force for the game. And at the time, Medler was my direct manager, and he and I had talked for a bit, and I think he had grown to know my strengths and weaknesses. And so he came to me and was like, hey, you want to do this? I'm like, sure, I'll do it. Because at the time I was like a little lukewarm on some of like I liked some parts of TFT, but I thought others were like dangerous. And for me, like I've talked about before, the big thing I was worried about was TFT getting stale. But then he explained the sets model, and I went, okay, I could see how this could work. And so I was asked to take over. And so I joined the team. And so, like I said, about a month before we shipped. And I spent a good while essentially feeling like I needed to overcompensate, because TFT went to PBE, so like a week or two later, was very, very successful. And so there's this big successful game that Riot was like kind of banking on. And I didn't do shit on it for that, you know, because I'd been on the team for 2 weeks. So I felt like I needed to overcompensate to show that I deserved to be there. And so I got to work and started making changes and trying to improve the game. And so I would do things like work with Linda and improve the item drop system early on, or come up with a better framework for how champions should be. Because when we launched, we purposely had bad champions, and I went, that's a bad call, and changed how we needed to do that. I then also helped with balance, which did not make the product lead at the time, did not make him happy, because he's like, my senior design lead shouldn't be doing balance and hands-on. He should be going around being a mentor. And this is where, again, my leadership style tends to differ from other design leads, because I like to be a little more hands-on and on the front line with everybody. And then continue on from there. And it just kind of grew and grew, and, worked with people like, Brad Wenban. That was another one who was really, really key to the initial development of TFT. He was the one who introduced the glove. And I remember him pitching me all the glove items. Me kind of going, ooh, Jeweled Gauntlet, that's great. Your spell can crit, love it. Some other one he had, ooh, not so great. These gloves, oh my God, this is amazing. Don't ever get rid of this. Brad Wenban is the one who pitched Thieves Gloves for the first time. I remember being like, this item's amazing and is going to be a core part of TFT forever. Again, goes back to that recognizing good ideas. And yeah, then from there, it just kept growing and growing and growing. And because I was trying to overcompensate and show that I deserved to be there, I threw myself at the work and slowly but surely became sort of the expert who really understood the game better than anybody, at least internally. And that grew and grew and grew. And so, yeah. But again, I'm just one part of a team, right? Like Whitrock, for example, was the one who made set 2, and we talked about what worked and what didn't. And then Whitrock made set 3 from the learnings from set 2. All the while, there's a whole mobile team that was putting together the mobile engine, which I didn't really deal with because that was a separate team. But that was a really, really important for our growth, right? So it's like they did a bunch of cool stuff. And so yeah, TLDR here, was on an R&D project internal, got it canceled myself, and then spent some time pitching. Slot opened up. Medler asked me to join. I said yes. Spent some time overcompensating to show that I actually deserved it. And now, the original team worked on TFT for 5 months. I've been here for almost 6 years. I feel like I've earned it at this point. I feel like I can take my foot off the gas a little, and, but that's kind of why I went so hard, and that's kind of my origin story. So, yeah, that's a tiny mouse. I have never seen a tiny little mouse. Okay, have a good day, mouse. Anyway, on that note, looks like I got through 4 questions today. There was one more I was supposed to get through, but I yapped a little much. So, today is Wednesday. Today is branch cut, which means patch has to be 100% locked. So by noon, yay. So if somehow this Bastion Morgana comp truly does rise to S tier, which I don't think it will, but let's say it truly, truly rises to the S tier, I won't have time to nerf Poppy. It won't be done. But yeah, but at least I pulled the Morgana change. So that's good. Okay. That's it for me today. Again, another relatively quiet day coming up. Set 15 work, assuming Perforce actually works. I need to do my deep dive on their forecasts. That's my next big thing. So, and then, yeah. Okay. Hopefully you guys enjoy. Again, keep watching these. I appreciate y'all. Keep feeding the questions. I just want to answer what you guys want to learn about. So, yeah. All right. That's going to do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.